Welcome back, puppies, to Barking Dog Studio. We're going to get this Minotaur Demon Lord finished today. Some blood for the blood god. I'm going to go ahead and touch up his glaive here. And this is the very first time I'm ever using this effect. And I'm actually very happy with the way that it turned out. Now what you won't see in this video, and you won't see it in the final pictures I put at the end of the video, I have gone back and touched it up with a much finer detail brush and gave it a couple of little other runs in the grooves of the glaive. That is the blood. Gave it, made it look like the blood's running down the blade in a couple of the grooves for the engraving. Here we're throwing a little on the end of the skull, make it look like he bashed somebody's head in. Yeah, if you can pick up the fans and the air conditioner in the background, I'm sorry about that if it's annoying. It's late at night and I want to go ahead and get this wrapped up. And there you see me touching up the base. The base is making a cameo in this video. Just throwing a little blood, pulling out around from that head. Make it look fresh. It's one of the things I really liked about this Citadel paint, Blood of the Blood God. It's transparent and very, very glossy. It does the job of conveying blood very well. Here you see me throwing some of the weapons that are there on the base. Alright, let's get back to the Minotaur Demon Lord. And here, going for a splash effect. And this is an old technique. It's one I've only done a few times. It was one of the very first painting techniques I ever really tried. I think I was doing this flicking of blood on stuff. Back then I just used, kind of a blood red regular acrylic paint. And you see me doing a little bit of stippling with the old teeth brush, trying to get a splatter effect of blood. And of course you see I put a paper towel and some masking tape around the rest of the Minotaur, because while I don't mind him getting a little blood splatter on his hand and possibly that bracer there, I didn't want it to splatter all over the rest of him. There are times you might want that, but with this piece, which I have a feeling may end up being more of a kind of a eyepiece rather than getting used a whole lot. And even when he does get used, and he deserves to get used at some point, right? Big badass looking guy like this. It's a pretty good miniature from Reaper Miniatures. But I just didn't want to cover up any of those other details. And there you see me liberally flicking the brush as much as I could, trying to get a splatter effect all over the place. And here I'm going to be touching up some of his metal bits. That's a ring that he has. And then he's got this little earring back here. And while this is a really good sculpt from the Reaper Miniatures Bones line, because it is that soft bones material, some of the details are a little hard to pick out if you're not really paying attention. Of course, throwing some paint on there helps bring them out a little bit. But I almost missed that earring in his ear. I think I noticed it when I was assembling him, but after painting it and spending so much time working out some of these other details, I'd almost forgotten it. But I spent some time studying the miniature before doing these final touch-ups. Here I'm just trying to bring that shine out of those metal blades he's got hanging off of his leather strap for his shoulder pauldron and arm guards. I guess shoulder pauldron is kind of redundant, perhaps. Pauldron kind of speaks for itself, right? And that is model color steel that I'm using. And that's an oh shit moment. You can see where I got some of the steel color on his flesh. And so for the next few minutes I'm going to be covering that up and blending. I think here I was just checking out the miniature. Looking to see what else there was on it before I committed to covering that up. And here we go. I decided that was a little too light. One of the things that's nice about using a wet palette and really thin paints is that it's very easy to blend out and correct that. I'm covering up the metal, and you want it to be kind of opaque to cover up that steel color on his flesh. So I'm kind of liberal there, but I decided that color is a little too light, so I get the next shade color down that I had used, which I think I show the one below that one. I think the one you see me working with there is a combination of rust from the model color airline, and I mix it in with a little bit of orange rust, and then to darken it up a little bit I hit it with some of the brown in that same rust color line from Vallejo. And see that? Touching it up with my finger, that actually works really well. Kind of rubbing some of the excess pigment off. Something I'll do here in a minute is I kind of clean up the brush a little bit, and I just come back and kind of push up with just a really wet brush, and it moves that pigment around and helps it blend in. Kind of covers up what it does is it actually smooths up the transition. You'll see me do that here in a minute. And right, here we go, smoothing up those transitions. He's got a sharp crease there in his muscle tone. So I want to kind of highlight that and bring that muscle out where his arm's kind of extended. So I'm just layering it back on. Make sure we get that covered up. Make sure we get everything blended in real good. This kind of stuff happens, when you're painting miniatures, especially when you're painting ones that are 28mm. This guy's the 28mm scale, but he's a much larger miniature. I think he's probably closer to somewhere between 50 and 60 mil, maybe. So the details on him are large enough, but you still overpaint sometimes, and it's just part of the hobby. You got to get good at blending stuff out and covering it up. And there we go. There's the brown model there making a cameo. Or the bottle was anyway. And here again I'm just trying to work in the transitions from those highlights that I just re-added, trying to cover up that part where I got some of the steel on his flesh, because originally all those transitions were airbrushed in, so they're very, very smooth and very, very gradual transitions. So a lot of wet blending going on here, trying to smooth it out, so you really can't tell the difference where there was brush versus where there was airbrush. All right. And here I'm getting ready to highlight his mane. And I'm using the Minotaur White highlight from the P3 line. And one of my favorite dry brushes, and that's just a cheap dry brush I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I don't know if you guys picked up on that or not. My wife was in the background there talking to our youngest son. It's his bedtime here in the Oliver household. We've all got work and school tomorrow. So I just kind of gradually bring those highlights kind of down into, you don't want to come too far down. It defeats the purpose of highlighting. So getting rid of some of the excess there on my skin, touching up his goatee. Bringing out that braid. Go back and finish off his tail here in a minute. You see, I kind of bring it down to the front there, but I don't come very far down with it. Want a nice transition. Alright, let's get that tail. Again, I'm not just sticking straight to the very top of that with that highlight. I am bringing it down to kind of the top side. Just lends itself to a more gradual, realistic highlight. And I do hit that other side a little bit, but I'm not too worried about it because it is kind of blocked there by his glaive. I think I'm giving him the once over here, make sure I'm not missing anything. And some of the highlights and some of the touch-ups I didn't record. If you look there at his pauldron, I actually mixed in a little bit of silver with, and that was the Game Air silver. I mixed it in with a little bit of the model color bronze and highlighted just a few spots on his pauldron that I wanted to bring up, like the end of the nose, the eyes, and that little symbol on the forehead there, kind of between the horns. And here I'm masking off the glaive where I have the blood for the blood god splatter, and I mask off the end there where the skull is at the other end of the glaive, because I want to keep that look of that Citadel paint. And I'm getting ready to use a Tester's dull coat, clear coat, a lacquer finish, an enamel lacquer finish for the model. And I just wanted to cover those up because while the rest of it is getting a matte finish, I didn't want to ruin the sheen or that beautiful clear, well, blood looking blood, and the lacquer matte finish would have knocked it down quite a bit. So I taped this off here, and I don't think I actually record me using the can, but it's from Testers. It's in a small spray can, and this was my first time using it. I'm pleased with it. It was nice and quick. It did save time. I typically run Vallejo acrylic clear coats through my airbrush. But that Tester's spray can gets really good reviews online, so I thought I'd give it a shot, and I'm happy with the results. I will definitely be probably picking up another can of it in the future when this one runs out. It's a small can, but I suspect it will go quite a ways. So there you saw me pulling out the silly putty that was masking the holes inside the dais that this Minotaur will sit down, or he'll sit on top of it, but the slots there on the bottom of his hooves will fit down into that dais, and I want a clean plastic to plastic gluing surface. And I tend to mask stuff off with silly putty because silly putty doesn't really like to stick to a whole lot of things, so it typically cleans off really easy. It's much less the hassle than trying to clean off tape sometimes, and you don't have any residue left behind like you do with tape. Sometimes masking tape has its purpose, and I do use it at times, but for a project like this where I know I'm going to be leaving it on there for a while and I don't want a big hassle when it comes to taking it off, I typically prefer to use silly putty. And I will reuse that silly putty. I add it later back in with the rest of the egg where the rest of the silly putty's at. Silly putty used to be really easy to find when I was a kid, and nowadays I pretty much can only find it at Hobby Lobby. Gorilla Glue, some of my favorite super glue. Little dab will do you. You don't want to do too much glue. The glue doesn't like sticking to itself, so typically when you're gluing stuff together you want kind of a thin layer of the super glue. And there we go. He is finished. And here we go with the final product, guys. He was a blast of paint. I'm actually wanting to get one for myself now. Here we just have a few close-up shots of the base and the Minotaur himself. Minotaur Demon Lord. Bark on, puppies.